Welcome back to Best 11s, the series where I make the best possible team with a new set of restrictions each time. This week, our team are Peter Crouch's Giants. For this team, we must select players who are 190 centimeters, that's 6'3" or taller. Any player under that height is not considered for selection. As always, they must have at least one Premier League appearance, and their Premier League career is considered most important for selection. Here's the team without any names attached. Go ahead and guess as many as you can if you want. It's a fairly tough one this week, I'd say. I'd be impressed with more than 6 out of 11. Starting with what is naturally the easiest position to fill on the team is our goalkeeper, and in nets we have Petr Cech. Petr Cech made 443 appearances in the Premier League, with 202 clean sheets. He of course had that legendary season for Chelsea, conceding only 15 goals throughout the entire Premier League campaign of 38 games. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he is also the tallest player on the team, and what really blows my mind about Petr Cech's career is that he could, as stupid as it sounds to say, have been much better. That head injury, which was so horrific, putting aside the time it took to return from it, he was never quite the same player afterwards in terms of aerial dominance and his one-on-one ability and his bravery, which is completely understandable. But he was such a spectacular keeper. Before the head injury, I really think he could have challenged Peter Schmeichel to be the best keeper ever in the Premier League, but ultimately he still had an incredible Premier League career, playing for many very strong Chelsea and Arsenal teams over his time in the Premier League. Edwin van der Sar was probably the closest keeper to being selected after Petr Cech, and there were lots of relatively strong options, but I felt like Petr Cech was a pretty easy choice to slot in at goalkeeper for the team. Next up we have our left back, and both fullback spots were quite tough to fill. Left back more so than right back in my opinion, but I have chosen Sylvain Distin, a bit of a Premier League journeyman, but he made impact wherever he went, playing for Newcastle, Man City, Portsmouth, Everton and Bournemouth, although that last spell was probably the most disappointing of the four. He made a whopping 469 Premier League appearances, with 121 clean sheets in that time span. He filled in at left back occasionally, especially in his first spell at Newcastle on loan. He was incredibly quick for his size, and he was Man City Player of the Year in 2002-2003 and Everton Player of the Year in 2011 and 2012. I feel like he's a bit of an underrated Premier League player. He was also part of Portsmouth's FA Cup winning team. He only made 6 assists in his Premier League career, but one of those was for Tim Howard's 100-yard goal way back, and I think we can all agree that it was Distin's pass which really made that goal. He was also appointed captain at Man City and at Portsmouth, which shows a level of leadership which he had, and that allowed him to have his long career in the Premier League. He was, in my opinion, the best option at left back. I considered a lot of other left-footed tall centre-backs, but there really are no natural out-and-out left-backs at this size. And the team overall does lack width, as the same thing holds true for the wingers. As you'll see later, I have opted for a 4-3-3 to try and counteract that, but you still need fullbacks, and this left side is probably the player who is most out of their natural position. Centre-back, as with the goalkeeper, is another pretty easy position to fill with this set of restrictions, and I feel like both of my centre-backs will need no introduction. First of all, we have Virgil van Dijk, the tallest outfield player on the team at 195 centimeters. He's played for both Southampton and Liverpool in the Premier League, 262 appearances and 101 clean sheets to his name. He also has a surprisingly high 22 goals, which I know he's a weapon from set pieces, and hopefully this team will cash in with a lot of goals from them. The Dutch defender will pair in nicely with my other centre-back, Man City legend Vincent Kompany. At 193 centimeters, he made 265 appearances for Man City, and of course is now manager at Burnley. He has 94 clean sheets, which is a worse ratio than Van Dijk, interestingly. But they have a very similar amount of games played, although in the near future Van Dijk will overtake him, I'm sure. There were a couple of other potential centre-backs, including players like Tony Adams and Gary Cahill, but ultimately I feel like you couldn't really go wrong with Virgil van Dijk and Vincent Kompany. It's a very strong centre-back partnership. And then at right back, I have a player who I feel was very underappreciated in his time at Man United, in John O'Shea. While never the flashiest member of any of Sir Alex Ferguson's Man United teams, he was always a very solid part, and quite versatile, as he often did fill in at right back despite his size, and also occasionally filling in central midfield, as well as his natural centre back position. While never the star of any of the United squads, he was always a very solid player. He also scored one of the great Premier League lobs in my opinion over Manuel Almunia, perhaps one of the most unexpected moments of Premier League brilliance. the best, worst tattoo I've ever seen in person comes from a guy who I played some football with in college, and as a result of losing a bet, he had to get a tattoo of John O'Shea on his calf. Amazingly, he went through with it, and he now forever has the face of John O'Shea on his calf. I bet he's really rooting for him to become Ireland manager, so that his tattoo gains new relevancy. Perhaps if John O'Shea could lead Ireland to a World Cup, it will seem even more worth it. But tattoos aside, John O'Shea made 445 appearances for both Man United and Sunderland in the Premier League. He kept 115 clean sheets as a member of those various defences. And for me, he really was the standout right-back candidate, with there not being a lot of other options, and John O'Shea coming as close to a natural fullback at that height as you can find. Next up is my midfield, and as discussed earlier, I have gone for a 4-3-3 formation in order to hide the deficiencies at winger with this set of restrictions. So that means I get 3 central midfielders. I felt like 2 of them were pretty easy choices, and then with the final one it was a bit of a debatable decision, but I followed my heart. So we'll start with the uncontroversial choices. My first central midfielder is Patrick Vieira. You may have heard of him, but I was a little surprised that Patrick Vieira was as tall as this. He's 192 centimetres, and he made 307 appearances for both Arsenal and Man City as a box-to-box, destroying midfielder. He had 31 goals and 34 assists in that time. Of course, they're part of the Arsenal Invincibles, and nobody really came close to challenging him for his spot in midfield. Next up, a player with a lot less appearances, but one who's already made a great impact in Premier League. We've got Rodri, and again, I didn't think Rodri was this tall for some reason. This might just be me not knowing ball, but I had him down as quite a bit shorter than this. But he's 6'3", 190 centimetres, and having already made 169 appearances for Man City, he is probably the dominant midfielder of the current Premier League era, with 21 goals and 21 assists, perfectly balanced as of time of recording. He is the shortest player in the squad at his measly 190 centimetres, so let's hope he doesn't get bullied too often in the changing rooms for being too short. And finally, my controversial midfield choice, Marouane Fellaini, comes in at 194 centimetres, and a magnificent haired midfielder, had 260 appearances for both Everton and Manchester United. This was one of the most difficult decisions on the team, and probably the most controversial. Ultimately, I was stuck between him, Rujuli, and Nemanja Matic as the final midfielder in my 4-3-3. For me, it came down to the longevity of Fellaini's Premier League career. Rujuli was obviously a fabulous player, but he didn't have too many appearances in the Premier League, and was at his absolute best elsewhere, as significant as he was for Chelsea. I felt like Matic was a bit of a middle ground between the two. Ultimately, I do have quite a big soft spot for the man with the fluffy hair and the chest made of silk, and he was a major piece for both Everton and Manchester United at different times, as maligned as he often was later in his career. And now to my strikers. First of all, we have Emmanuel Adebayor at 191 centimetres. This journeyman striker had stints at Arsenal, Man City, Spurs and Crystal Palace in the Premier League, making 241 appearances and scoring 97 goals in that time. This was probably behind Fellaini the other most difficult decision on the team, and other strikers such as Peter Crouch, Duncan Ferguson, Benteke or Romelu Lukaku were all eligible. But for me, I feel like Emmanuel Adebayor, when he was at the races, was a very good striker, and perhaps a little bit underrated. He did have the problem of motivation, but he scored some great goals and had some great games for Arsenal and Spurs. He also dragged Togo to a World Cup, which I know shouldn't influence my ratings, but is something I'll always respect him for. Next up, we have Erling Haaland. I mean, he's just tall and he scores goals. He's only been here for 60 odd matches, but goal per game ratio is just insane. 0.97 goals per game is just an insane level to hit. The fact that every match Haaland plays he's averaging out to 1 a game is just unthinkable really, and I understand that's over a short time period and for a very dominant team, but even with the small sample size, I have no doubts about including him to lead the line. And finally, finishing a slightly immobile top 3, you have Olivier Giroud, standing at 193 centimetres. He made 255 appearances in the Premier League for Arsenal and Chelsea. Again, you could maybe put him in with Adebayor in terms of players who could be replaced in this 11. But Giroud oozed class and was a fan favourite at both Arsenal and Chelsea. And I feel like he was very underappreciated until later in his career. He won the Puskás Award, of course, for that flying backheel goal, and also won 4 FA Cups, the Europa League and the Champions League in his time at Arsenal and Chelsea. So there's the final completed team. I feel like there's strong players, but the formation might be a bit of a question. But the core of that team, you got Petr Cech in goal, Van Dijk and company, Rodri and Vieira. They're going to be tough to break through in the middle of the park. And then you just hoof the ball forward and hope Haaland can run onto a few flick-ons from Adebayor and Giroud. I think you got some good things coming. And obviously they're going to be an absolute menace from set pieces. Although I'm not sure who takes them. I guess Rodri or someone can take them. And then all other 9 outfielders can run on and score 10 headers a season. As whichever one doesn't get picked up by the tall players on the opposition team will have a nice 5'7" winger to win a header against. Our manager will be Ruijuli. He was 191 centimeters tall, so he'll be able to understand the play style of our team. And of course he was a player manager at Chelsea, so if he wants to, he can sub himself on and replace Marouane Fellaini if he's not having one of his good games. He was probably the closest player to making the team who didn't get in, although looking back, I think maybe Duncan Ferguson was also a bit unlucky. And our mascot will be Peter Crouch. He is also very, very tall, and the team is named after him, of course, and he'll do a great robot on the sidelines to motivate the players. So in my rankings, Short Kings versus Peter Crouch's Giants, for now I'm going to have to put Peter Crouch's Giants in second place. I think they're just a bit more lacking, especially without the wingers and the natural fullbacks. The Short Kings obviously had a bit of a weak heart of defence and not the best keeper, but they had truly world-class players in every position. Whereas you're still going to very good players in Adebayor and Giroud, but I think the quality is a bit less in the Giants 11. Although it would be very interesting to see a game between the two, to see how much the set piece difference would make an impact. So just to recap, we've got an average height of 192 centimeters, 290 is the average Premier League appearances. Our team weaknesses, in my opinion, the lack of full out and out natural fullbacks and no wingers might cause some issues. The team strength is that heart of the defence, the midfield and the goalkeeper, and we have 13 unique Premier League teams represented, with Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, Man City, Portsmouth, Everton, Bournemouth, Southampton, Liverpool, Man United, Sunderland, Spurs and Crystal Palace. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Best 11s. I hope things are a little better than last time. I'm still working on my audio and my graphics. I'm just making small tweaks and improvements, and I'm going to keep doing that throughout the series. We'll be back next time with probably a non-height related episode to follow up these two. I haven't quite decided on the topic, but I have a few in mind, and if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. If you're watching this, again, you're one of my very first viewers, so I really appreciate you even being here to listen to this part, if anybody is. So I'll be back next week with another 11. Thank you very much.